Well, more than 1,000 police officers in Eastern DRC have changed their allegiance and they are now pledging their allegiance to the M23. These were previously Congolese soldiers that have now changed to follow the M23. I'm going to tell you more about that and what that means for the M23, as well as another town has yet again fallen into the hands of the M23. I am talking about Minembwe. I'm also going to give you more information about the onslaught that the M23 has waged on Minembwe and the kind of strategies that the Congolese government is now putting forward. And talking about strategies, we're also going to talk about the influence in Central Africa. Just recently, DRC say that they are going to talk to Chad so that Chad can give some of its forces to fight in DRC. Well, Rwanda is going for another country yet in Central Africa so that they can also assist them in fighting this entire war. Well, this is Bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on DRC, M23 and Rwanda, you get notified as soon as possible. Well, more than 1,800 police officers that were Congolese police officers have changed their allegiance from getting the authority or their commands from the Congolese government to now following the M23. These were police officers in these parts that were conquered by the M23 that have been taken over by the M23. The army, the Congolese army, fled from those regions. Some of the Congolese army remained, and they are part of these 1,800, including some civilians as well, who have joined this force to now back the M23. We are talking about a considerable number. This is 1,800 Congolese, former Congolese police officers who are now part of the M23. And the M23 released that statement saying that they're now going to train these 1,800 police officers to make sure that they now follow the doctrine of the M23, that they go and police these regions as the M23 would like. Well, this just shows that the M23 is planning to stay for a while in this region. And we keep comparing this with the first time that the M23 took Goma. And this was a totally different scenario because right now we are seeing the M23 really planning to take over these critical facilities in these cities and make sure that they establish themselves for a longer period of time. And just last time when I was giving information about yet another incident in the DRC and M23, we spoke about the fact that right now the M23 will have a very wide area to defend. They will have multiple battlegrounds with the Congolese army and its allies, the militia that are working together with the Congolese army. And right now, we are seeing strategies being put in place by the M23 to make sure that they defend the entire of this region. Because 1,800 is not a small number. If you're talking about people who are going to join the forces in making sure that these regions are still held in the control of the M23. So this is part of the strategy that we are seeing the M23 putting forward to make sure that they defend these critical areas that they have taken so far. It is also a show of might and resources that the M23 now has in their onslaught against the Congolese government. Because taking in 1,800 police officers, you are going to pay them salaries, you're going to make sure that they are trained. Where they are trained, they need facilities, they need to be able to be taken care of in those retraining centers. So that shows the capability that the M23 has. It shows that it has quite some might, and it is moving the might in terms of making sure that it recruits very huge numbers so that these huge numbers can support these militia in fighting the Congolese government. And in another story, yet another very critical town in Eastern DRC has fallen into the arms of the M23. And I am talking about Minembwe, as I earlier started by saying. We have been here talking about the towns that have fallen into the hands of the M23. We started by Goma, we went to Bukavu, we went to Kamanyola, we went to Uvira, and right now, the recent town that has been taken by the M23 is Minembwe. Well, as one can denote from the geography, the M23 has been moving south. Perhaps it is part of their strategy to secure, first of all, the eastern DRC towns, to make sure that all these towns are falling into place so that they can maybe advance forward. But one will say that this is just part of their strategy to retain only these towns that are bordering the countries to the east. And we're talking about Goma, a strategic city that is bordering Rwanda. Now you're talking about even towns that are bordering Burundi. Burundi has not been very friendly to the M23, but right now it is part of their strategy to also block the support that Burundi will be giving to the DRC in fighting the M23. So we are seeing a particular designated way of taking over these cities and towns, and we are seeing these M23 forces going southwards, targeting the cities that are bordering countries to the east. Perhaps that is their strategy of designating that part of DRC to be a fully M23 zone. And as reports are denoting, is that this part of the East DRC, this Minembwe town, was not conquered directly by the M23, but it was an ally of M23, a Tutsi militia that is operating in that particular part of DRC, that conquered that town, and by far and large, that is just the M23 conquering that part of the DRC. So there are allies, as we said even earlier, there are allies for the M23. There are militias working in line with what the M23 is doing. And there are allies on the other side, the FDLR, other allies working, Wazalendo working with the Congolese government. So we have different sects, but we have two major sides. And these sects are working with either side to make sure that they advance their agenda, mostly in eastern DRC. And finally, the DRC gave its intention to work closely with Chad so that Chad can assist the DRC in fighting the M23 specifically and other militia against the Congolese government in eastern DRC. Well, the Congolese government has been really looking for partners to fight the M23 across Africa. The East Africa Regional Force was also in DRC sometime last year and they left. And the reason was that the DRC wanted the East Africa Regional Force to fight the M23, but the East Africa Regional Force say that its mandate was only to secure a buffer zone so that there could be talks, negotiations could happen so that there will be peace. And when the DRC wanted the East Africa Regional Force to fight the M23, they say that is a no, and the ESCRF had to leave the DRC. We have been seeing efforts by the DRC to have enough troops to fight the M23, experienced troops also to fight the DRC, but that has been a long shot for them. And right now we are talking about the intention to involve Chadian army in fighting the M23. And Rwanda has not let that lie down, because Rwanda now has expressed its interest to also go into the Central African Republic. Rwanda has been very, very instrumental in assisting the Central African Republic to maintain law and order in the country and fight other rebels in the country. So Rwanda is saying that if you go the Chadian way, we can also decide to go the Central African Republic way and have our men and women in Central Africa so that we can also do some operations in Central African Republic. Well, we are seeing a standoff between the DRC and Rwanda. And the UN just recently came up with a resolution on this crisis. And part of the recommendation was that the DRC should stop its war against the M23 and that Rwanda should also stop backing the M23. But if you look keenly at the resolutions that have been given by the UN, you'll find that there is nothing new. There is nothing new that has been discussed or given as part of the solutions from the time that all this crisis started. It is negotiations, and one party is not ready for negotiations. The DRC is ready to fight the M23 without negotiating. And on the other side, you're finding Rwanda saying that let us sit on the table, let us have a discussion with the M23, make sure that you table your issues so that you can have a country forward. And that is something that Tshisekedi is not ready to do.